What is up, YouTube? And today we're going to be doing the brakes on a 2004 Acura RSX. It's a relatively simple job, although I will warn you, if you've never done a brake job before, you do want to be careful and make sure you test before you go out and drive your car. It's somewhat of a simple job, however it is a crucial part of driving a car is being able to stop your car. So if you're not sure, watch a couple videos. If you're still not sure, leave it to a professional, because the last thing you want to do is mess up your brakes and hurt yourself, hurt somebody else. So before we get started on the job, let's take a look at all the parts and tools we're going to need. All right, so if we take a look inside of our magic toolbox, we will find everything that we're going to need. Of course, it's always handy to have some rags around. We have front pads, back pads, because we are going to do a full set. Of course, gloves are a requirement, I think, in this job. Brake fluid is nasty stuff. It is hydroscopic. It kind of sucks the moisture out of the air. If you get it on your hands, it's going to mess up your hands a little bit, and it could possibly cause like cancer, things like that. Cancer is bad. This is a brake pad spreader, and if you don't have one of these, stop, go get one. Spend like $5 to get one at O'Reilly's or AutoZone or Walmart. They're pretty easy to find, and they're absolute godsends when you comes to doing this job. In addition to that, you are also going to need brake fluid. Of course, we're going to be using .4, and make sure that you are using new brake fluid, because old brake fluid, once you've opened the bottle, basically it's ruined, because like I said, brake fluid is hydroscopic. So once you open it and you introduce that fluid to open air, it's going to suck some moisture in, and then it just kind of sits there and gets bad and gets worse over time. In addition to that, we're going to be using some grease. This is synthetic caliper grease. We're going to use this, or actually what I'm going to be using is this Master Pro grease, and we're going to be putting this on the back of the discs, I'm sorry, on the back of the pads, as well as on the guide pins for the brake calipers. And that's just a preventative maintenance thing. You don't absolutely have to do it, but putting the grease on the back of the pads is going to help reduce squeak, or eliminate squeak, and prolong the life of the brakes. And the guide pin thing is just preventative maintenance to help make sure that your caliper pistons don't stick. All right, so before we go and start tearing stuff apart, we're going to do a couple things to make sure the car is safe to work on. First thing first, we're going to be putting some chocks under the wheels. I know you can't see that. I'm still working on getting better lighting in the garage, but that's all right. So we're going to put some little cheap wheel chocks behind both of the rear wheels. Give them a little kick. Make sure they are snug. After you've put the wheel chocks up on the rear tires or front tires, if you're starting with the front, you want to make sure that the car is in gear and pull that parking brake all the way up. After you've got your parking brake set, your wheel chocks set, you want to go ahead and pop the hood. So if you're wondering why we pop the hood open to do a brake job, it's so that we can check the brake fluid reservoir and make sure that it's not super full. If over time, if someone has refilled or topped off the brake fluid to the maximum level and your brake pads are very worn, how it works is those pistons press the pads in as they wear down. As the material wears off of the brake pad, the piston automatically adjusts and kind of pushes it a little bit further, until eventually there's no material left, and that's when you get that squeak, because the pad. Okay guys, now that we have the metal backing of the plate, and at that point it's definitely telling you, hey, it's time to replace your pads. But as that happens, more and more of this fluid that's in here will go into your brake lines and stay there. And that's how the system works. Is how it keeps pressure on the line, is by adding fluid from here to the lines as needed. So when we're replacing the pads, we're going to be pressing these heavily compressed pistons, or they're not compressed, they're actually pressed out, but they're pressed like this against the rotor. And as we replace those pads, we're going to be pushing the pistons back out, and when we do that, it's going to be putting fluid back into the line. So if this is super full while we're doing that, we could actually, and if this is closed, we're actually going to be maybe creating too much pressure in the system. We can maybe pop a line or something like that. So we just want to make sure that it's not super full, and as I can tell from here, it's about 3/4 of the way full, so we shouldn't have any issues. Okay guys, now that we have put the wheel chocks on the car. We have set the parking brake and made sure the car was in gear. We opened the hood and made sure that our fluid reservoir wasn't super full. We are ready to start working on the car. So first things first is we're going to have to get the car off the ground. I don't have a way to replace brake pads with the car, with the wheel still on the tire. So if you guys know a way, let me know, because that would be super helpful. But so we're gonna have to jack the car up. If you do not have power tools, now would be the time to go ahead and not remove. I did this in the last video. Not remove, loosen, keyword. Loosen the lug nuts on your tires, because you have the gravity and the weight of the car sitting on the wheel. It's possible to torque or remove the lug nuts. Not remove, loosen. Guys, don't remove your lug nuts with the car on the ground and the weight of the wheel in the car, or the weight of the car on the wheel. That's gonna be bad. Anyways, so if you do not have power tools, go ahead and loosen your lug nuts. You don't want to loosen them a lot, just crack them, to the point where they are, a half turn, and you're good to go. Now we have the car lifted up, we're gonna move the jack stands into place. And that should be enough to keep our wheel off the ground once we lower our jack. And once again, guys, when you're jacking up your car and putting it on jack stands, make sure that you're putting it on the metal part here, not on the plastic part here. Now, of course, we'll do the same for the other side, since we're gonna be doing both front wheels at the same time. So the next step is for you to spend 3.5 hours looking for the special key to get your lug nuts off. All right, so let's get these wheels off. And remember, a good place to store your wheel when you're not using it is underneath the car, facing with this side facing up. Well, let's go get that other wheel. All right, and once your wheel is removed, you want to take off your 2 guide pin bolts. Actually, these are keeper bolts. There's one here and there's one on the bottom side. If you're not sure where the one on the bottom side is, just look for this rubber boot on the bottom and you'll find it. So we'll take this off, and it should be, it'll be a little bit difficult to get off. Okay, now that we've got this one loose, we're gonna go ahead and loosen the other one without taking this one out. Reason for that is because when we take this one out, the caliper will kind of slide freely, and it'll be pretty much impossible to get that other one out. All right, and once they're both loose, you wanna go ahead and take them all the way out. Before you remove both bolts, you do want to hold on to the caliper because it may just slide right out. Okay, once you've got both of those pins out, you should be able to slide the caliper right off. Okay, before we do anything else, we're going to go ahead and hang our caliper by something up here. I'm just going to put a zip tie through here and another zip tie through that, just because my zip ties aren't long enough. And we will hang this from the suspension spring. That'll work. The reason why we hung this instead of just letting it hang is because we don't want the brake caliper to hang by the brake line. That causes unnecessary stress to that and could cause some issues. Now, I've already done the other side of these brake pads, and I know that the pads are fine. So the squeak was coming from an issue with the guide pins. So I'm definitely going to go ahead and inspect these guide pins as well, but because I didn't record the other side, I am going to show you this piston. So as I was talking about, the piston, this is the piston here. So this is the piston right here, and as the brake pads get thinner and thinner, they wear down from use, the piston comes out more and more, and eventually it's kind of maxed out and there's no more material on the brake pad. Before we flatten out the piston, let's go ahead and remove our brake pads. And they should just kind of pop out. Now pay attention to this fact. This pad does not have any clips coming out of the edge of it. The pad in the back will. And as I mentioned, I don't think these pads are bad. However, this pad has a significant amount of brake dust built up in the crevice in the shoe. So it's not necessary to replace these, but I'm going to replace them anyways. Now, anytime you replace your pads, it's a good idea to inspect your guide pins. If you press on it and it doesn't move, like this one right now, it is stuck and it needs to be removed and cleaned out. So maybe this one will work. Ooh, That felt gross. I could hear it. You probably didn't pick it up on camera, but this one definitely has some grit inside of it, and it's slowly returning, but it definitely needs to be pulled out and cleaned up. So let's go ahead and do that. The best way to remove these pins is to get a small dentist pick like this and put it on the edge of the bolt. Careful not to scrape up against the rubber and separate the boot from this bolt. This bolt will not be attached to anything and it should slide right out as soon as the boot is disconnected. And there is our guide pin bolt. We're going to clean this off, re-lubricate it, and put it back in. Now, cleaning these bolts is very simple. You just grab a shop rag and wipe everything off. All the grease, all the grime, everything. We will be re-lubricating this guide pin. Once you have the bolt nice and clean, you want to turn it around and inspect for any damage. This pin has what I would consider to be acceptable wear, so we will reuse it. Now that we've got the new pads in place, we need to compress the piston just a little bit so that we can fit it over the new pads. Remember, those new pads, or those old pads, weren't exactly bad condition, but they did wear down enough for this piston to come out. So we need to press that in. For that, we're going to be using our compression tool. You can pick this up at any hardware store. It just costs a few bucks, and it is a lifesaver. And just a little tip, instead of putting this in and screwing it down all the way to the center of the piston, grab your old brake pad and put the backside of it against the piston. So now we'll go ahead and compress this piston. So now we're going to give you a super close-up view of the piston being compressed and kind of give you an idea. Now the piston of the caliper is completely depressed and should make it a lot easier to put that caliper back on the brake pad. That tool makes life so much easier. Trust me, I've tried doing this job without that tool, and let's just say it was a foolish idea. So let's go ahead and put this back on the brakes and we're ready to go. Okay, and reinstallation is exactly the opposite of it, the uninstallation. You may have to press down on the guide pins just a little bit. Just as easy as that. Now we're going to grab the bolts that go into the back of them. I believe they're called carrier bolts. We're going to put a little bit of Loctite on them and we'll torque them down. I'll put the torque specs in the video. Now after you've torqued down your bolts here, you just put the wheel back on, torque your lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds, and you're good to go. All right, and that concludes how to do the front brake pads on your Acura RSX. If you want to do the rear, it's almost exactly the same thing, except you need one special tool, and it's this guy right here. And it's the reason you need it is because, like we showed you the pistons on the front, the rear also have pistons, but the pistons are not hollow. They have a channel, like a plus on them, and you use a special tool to turn the piston. So you turn it in instead of pushing it in, and that really is the only difference. I didn't change the rear brakes on this car because the fronts were in such good condition. All I did was inspect the guide pins on all 4 tires and clean and relubricate all of them. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something, and look for new videos coming soon. The next job we're gonna do is we're gonna do a complete brake flush on that car, but we're gonna try to do it with the tires on.